Mandeep and I are going to take a few moments, and Troy is going to jump in as needed, and go over a couple of possible challenges or questions that you all may have before even initiating this or as you get through the first unit. So Mandeep, do you want to start? I know you have some questions. Right?
Yeah. Are we looking at this in a small group advisory, so maybe 15 to 20 kids, or are we looking to roll this out in like an elective class that's filled with, we're talking about 30 students?
It actually can be turnkeyed into pretty much any setting. It's more in how you want to adapt the actual materials that are attached to your particular content. Generally speaking, it's for a mixed age group. So if you're in an elective class with a mixed age group of students, it can work. An advisory class, an after school program. It fits into pretty much any of the academic disciplines because it does have writing component. It is aligned to some of the Common Core standards. I didn't want it to be too heavily traditionally academic based. However, there are things that we are trying to move these students into meeting as a part of an overall educational goal. And so it does align to some of the standards in terms of making real work connections with the material or the content to the actual community and environment around them. It is layered into a lot of civics and science oriented topics. There's writing pieces, so there is a language art or an English element to it. It's computer technology. The students will be participating in creating, public service announcements, different technological pieces to it. So you can kind of frame it out into however you want to adapt it to the needs of the students.
Okay. Next question. So this is the big one. How are we going to track the information? What good data should we have ready, or kind of at the end, you're also doing a dissertation, so this is a pilot, to convince others. What information do we need to give you, or what information do we need to collect from the students?
And that's an excellent question. That also serves in part to the professional learning community that we're trying to establish with our pilot participants. So the educator or justice keeper, as well as the participants, will have reflection pieces along with each unit, as well as rubrics to assess their progress within that understanding of that unit. So if we're talking about environmental justice, they will kind of gauge themselves in the beginning and say, this is where I am in terms of the topic, this is what I know about, some environmental issues or what have you. And then after you complete the unit, then you and the participants will then reassess themselves about how this has turnkeyed into them either learning more about the topic, being more engaged. Where are they in terms of that trajectory towards activism? Is this the subject or the interest matter that's going to now propel me into looking towards the future as this is my career goal, this may be my area of study? Connect each participating school with interview. It's a program that the United Nations designed, which allows students to track their service hours. It's like a service resume. Okay. So all of the work that they do within the pilot, they'll get set up into that system. It tracks them from 14 to 24. So they'll be able to track even after the pilot is over, their service work, and we'll be able to see how they're taking the information that while they're in the pilot, as well as what they do with it afterwards.
And they can access that through something called the My Diplomat app.
Okay.
The My Diplomat app, it's an app, it's based on a Model UN simulation, but within the Model UN app, there's a link to create an account for the user in what I refer to as interview. And then to your point, interview is beautiful, not just for this project. Think about when a young person transitions into high school or when they transition into college, along with their application or even a job, It's like, look how great I am. Look at all the stuff I've done in the community. You know, it kind of just it's a lovely way to create a user profile for your non-academic work in the community. It's fantastic.
Additionally, as a part of my dissertation, the framework for the curriculum falls under multi-age communities. And these are basically, these are community schools who are generally under-resourced or underfunded and are looking for curriculums that are broader in scope so that they can actually teach to a broader age group without needing the funding to isolate first, second, third, what have you. So there is existing research out there, and one of the areas where the curriculum fills in that research is that there's a gap in terms of the type of curriculum these schools have or the instructional tools that they have at their disposal, right? They're usually resourced through outside organizations that help fund and provide information or projects for the school, like UNICEF, UNESCO. However, the greatest need that they have is to actually have a concrete curriculum from start to finish, right? And on various different themes or different topics that they can have in their repertoire curriculum, and then they can keep recycling with their students so that they're better informed of how to educate and move them into the current standards or practices in teaching. And the research has found that these schools have been more successful at, one, increasing student achievement, but also moving their students into social change type of professions and areas of studies. So there is quite a bit of research to support the potential success of the curriculum.
Well, we're encouraging all of the schools to reach out to their local UNA USA chapter. If a chapter does not exist, we can still have a conversation with the national office and figure out how to create some opportunities and linkages to engage the community, because this is certainly a community endeavor. I wanted to return to a couple questions too. I don't know if you were finished with your questions, but I wanted to ask, is the curriculum sequential in that you have to move through, I know this is a pilot, but do we have to go chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, or can you jump around and just do it as you want?
No, you don't have to follow it in a sequential order, with the exception of the first 2 units. Because the first 2 units set the foundation for how you want your circle meetings to continue, and the agreement, again, the community agreement is basically our set of values that we agree that we're going to uphold every time we meet together. So if I only feel safe when one person is talking at a time, then we're all agreeing that we're going to value that, because we want you to participate in this meeting every single time. So we're going to put that on our community agreement. We're going to all sign to it as we go through. If we need to add to it, we're going to add to it. And instead of us having to break up the group, and we're going to say, hey, you guys, we're going to follow our agreements, and we're going to stick to that, right? And it makes the students, what I found, when you're not directly addressing that they're doing something wrong, right? You don't want to punish their speech, right? And that's generally what it is. It's not a disrespect. It's just, I'm very passionate. This is how I feel, right? And so language sometimes becomes an issue, and you brought that up. I'm a little bit, with my older students, I always tell them there's a way, when we're passionate in our story, we tend to tell it the way we're feeling it. But then we sometimes say things because we want to be personally disrespectful about what's happened. We're going to avoid the personal disrespect, right? When you're passionate, you're going on, you're going to give me the conversation. I'm not going to break that. But, there are terms that we are all sensitive to, right? And if you're doing it just to use the term, and you're not respecting the fact that we've agreed that just makes me very uncomfortable, then the apology, oh, I'm so sorry, it doesn't really work at that point, right? Because it's not really a genuine apology, because you did it with the intention.
You're taking us down to a justice circle. So This is core to a justice circle.
This is core, right? And then that's something that they need to understand, and they value that, right? They value the idea that you're going to let me express myself the way but you don't want me to be disrespectful, just like I don't want to be disrespected. So I can live with that kind of an agreement. right? And again, it has to be something that you guys are comfortable with. Even the justice keeper, right? We don't remove ourselves from the circle, although we do want them to have more of the thing, but we do guide it, right? Like they are here because we felt there's a need for them to be here together, right? And so they're not gonna come to the table knowing that this is why I need to do this. It's going to take a little bit of us saying that this is gonna be different than how you've seen me before as your teacher, right? I'm not here to sit there and penalize you for having an opinion.
It's like adult and adult.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also want us to understand that we're in a respected environment, right? It still makes me uncomfortable to hear young kids curse and say these things, and that's not going to change just because we're in a circle sharing, right? And those things are just things we have to be open and honest about. We can't always be willing to kind of suppress our feelings and values too, to give, because then we're not allowing for that understanding of how speech is shared, right, and respected.
End of year event.
So that was the so the end of the year event, I kind of I guided you guys into it. So there's well, Troy and I are looking to create a summit that we kind of hold annually, right? Where we get our council justice participants, other youth activists, either through like some type of digital platform, or maybe take 50 of them and house them at the UN for a day, and we do basically a consultation for justice, but with a larger group. So that's something we're looking to kind of start us off. My idea is that if you get to the end of your last unit, you and your participants are going to create your own circles, and those are things that you can showcase with your local chapter and create a local civic minds youth summit. Invite the other participants in the school. At QC, I already spoke to your AP at QC with regards to doing this. Yes, and assistant principal at Queens Collegiate with regards to hosting this towards the end of the year, in the auditorium. And also I'm speaking with your chapter president, Margaret Shannon, with regards to also bringing in some resources to help you plan that event, along with Hala.
May I suggest too, so this is a learning community, and if you have ideas about what a culminating event can be for the pilot, not just you,
Yeah.
you know, because we're looking at things that everybody can do, we welcome those suggestions. And to Terry's point, you know, when we initially designed this project, this was not a pilot, this was a full-on project, and we were engaged in thousands of people all over the country and all over the world. It was a big thing. And right, you start big and then you scale back, right? But the culminating activity was this forum online. It was going to be hosted by the UN. It was going to be a small selection of kids all over the world who actually stepped up and became advocates and champions for things that they cared about in their neighborhood. You know, not what you're gonna do, what you did do. And we were going to feature them, you know, this little soundbite and have some kind of reception, and everybody else could kind of tune in online. And we were going to encourage them to do little celebrations within their schools. I still very much like that idea.
Yeah.
If that's something that as a community we decide is the best framework, you know, be mindful that whatever we do this year, we're going to want to do in years to come. And so we want it to be something that's sustainable, something that is measurable, something that's impactful, something that has legs. So perhaps, you know, in the next meeting or meetings in between, once the full community is established, we can kind of sit down and look at, okay, at the end, this is going to be the end project. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Kind of map it out and we execute.